Hello and welcome. I'm Pooja Shali, and today with Akshita Nandgopal and Nabila Jamal, I bring you a special telecast. Few Indian writers have managed to make a mass connect with their readers across all age groups and on issues of religion, civilization and history. And without a doubt, one of the authors who's managed to pull that off and have that achievement is the author of the Shiva trilogy and the Ramachandra series, Amish Tripathi, joining us here in the India Today studio. Amish, please come take your seat.
Hi guys.
Welcome to India
Hi.
Today, Amish.
Thank you.
Congratulations on War of Lanka. I
Thank
think
you.
the timing is something that everyone's talking about because I'm sure
Timing
you've
is
been
perfect
seeing.
and this feels like a third degree torture.
And you wouldn't miss an opportunity to, to wear
When I
your
write with the
t-shirt on
purity of
your
my heart. When I
chest.
do marketing, there's no such thing as too much marketing.
But this is much awaited. Everyone was asking, when are you going to come out with War of Lanka? It's out. It's going to be a war,
Yeah,
do you
you know,
think, for getting the first book?
Yeah, you know, luckily I get a lot of love from my readers, but at times it's really tough love, right? Because yes, this book was a little delayed. I'm sorry, wherever your camera is, my apologies to my readers through your camera. But you know, I live in London right now, and at times I would, you know, if I've gone cycling and you know, I just post. I'm not very active on social media, but if I posted a photograph, I'm cycling, I get scolded in the comments.
Saying what?
Why are you wasting time? Go home, right?
Why have you
sorry.
moved to London, though, if I may ask?
No, I work as a diplomat out there. I'm
He's
director
also
of the
the
Nehru
director
Center.
of the Nehru Center in
Lovely.
London.
You know, and since you spoke of London, is your work perceived the way it is in India abroad?
I don't get tough love out there, fortunately.
It's tough love here.
No, I get scolded if the book gets delayed.
No, that's understandable because it's a series, right?
But yeah, but there are, you know, there are many readers out there as well, many of Indian origin. Luckily, some native British as well who do read my works. But, you know, of course, they would perceive it from a different perspective. But yeah, it is interesting engaging with readers of all backgrounds.
Okay, let's get right down to it.
Okay.
War of Lanka. What really stands out for the reader, especially if they've read the rest of the Ramchandra series about this one?
Look, the first three books of the Ramchandra series are in something called a multilinear narrative. So I don't know how many, I don't know if the three of you have seen Rashomon, the Japanese movie, Akira Kurosawa's classic. Yeah. So that was essentially a story from different perspectives of each character. And I'd seen that a long time back, and that was one of the things that had stayed engraved in my mind, because essentially a story moves forward on the shoulders of the characters. And the same events appear very different depending on the perspective that you're coming from. Or in theoretical physics is called observer bias. I thought that, you know, the Ramayana essentially, the three characters, the three primary characters who drive the story of the Ramayana forward are Lord Ram, Goddess Sita and Ravan. So I thought it would be interesting to show the backstories of them all culminating in a common point, which is the kidnapping of Goddess Sita. And War of Lanka is where all the narratives merge. So it's from the kidnapping of Goddess Sita till the death of Ravan and the return of the royal couple to Ayodhya. So where for most modern urban Indians, where the traditional Ramayana ends, that's where this book ends.
Wow. You know, isn't this a timely book? Because I'm sure you're seeing the kind of controversies around Ravan's depiction in the latest Adi Purush. Would you like to comment on that, Amish?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay,
Why
let me
not?
ask it a different way. Right? Let's ask it a different way. How do you envision Ravan to be?
I
Because, you
portrayed
know,
that in my book.
As
And look,
someone who's an author, I'm sure you also enjoy creative liberty, right? So keeping that in mind.
Well, okay, let me answer your thing from one
Yeah.
perspective, because I'm not going to comment on things I don't know details about.
Sure.
But how I see Ravan, and it has been shown in my books, and it's there in many of the traditional versions of the Ramayana. In the modern way, sadly, we have imbibed many of the Western approaches to. We become very simplistic, black and white. That's not our way. It's not the traditional Indian way. Black and white, pure good, pure evil. This is not our way. Our ancestors were much more nuanced, much more mature than you know, the perspective of some of our invaders and what we've seen in the West in the modern day. So actually, if you read the traditional versions of all our stories, characters are usually shown in a very nuanced way, right? So what makes Ravan intriguing is he's not just a simple gunda, right? He's not just a thug.
Yeah.
There is no version of the Ramayana which shows Ravan as a hero, of course not. But there are many versions of the Ramayana which show Ravan in a nuanced way. So they show his bad points, and of course he had bad points. Massive ego, no control over his anger, no control over his desires. He did a lot of crimes against women because of that. He had no control over his desires.
But there's a flip side
But
also.
there is, but he had strengths as well.
Intelligence.
He was extremely intelligent. He was a master of the Vedas. He was,
A Shiv Bhakt.
he was a Shiv Bhakt. He composed the Tandav Stotra, which we Shaivites chant to this day, right? The chanting on the in the music of the trailer film for my first book, Immortals of Meluha, is the Tandav Stotra. And to this day, we Shaivites, when we hear it, man, rongte khade ho jata hai. It is such a powerful hymn. It was composed by Ravan, right? So he had strengths as well. And in that sense, there are things to learn from him, right? That no matter how talented you are, you should control your ego. You're not doing someone else a favor by being humble. You're doing yourself a favor. That's one of the things to learn from Ravan, because you don't generate unnecessary enemies if you control your,
You know,
your
Amish,
ego.
from what I've heard in your interviews and even your books, I can see that you're a vocal advocate for freedom of speech. You yourself have taken a lot of creative liberty when you write. It's very different from how we have seen in the Doordarshan days of Ram and Sita Ma and Ravan to be depicted. So because of the debate that's generating, where do you think this freedom of speech debate comes? Where is creativity with our Hindu gods and goddesses? And where is Ravan being shown as Khilji, allegedly, as the debate is? Where do you think it comes to freedom of speech that should be allowed? And where is it abuse?
You're trying very hard to get it onto one tangent, but let me step back and talk about what our culture actually is. And I've written articles on this.
Yes.
I had spoken of how freedom of expression was our natural way of life. I had quoted the Natya Shastra on this. And I had said how our laws put quote-unquote reasonable restrictions on freedom of expression, especially the First Amendment, which was actually promulgated before the first election, right? So you can question whether that actually reflected the will of the people, because it was promulgated in 1951. Our ancestors were very clear about freedom of expression, but they also had a corollary to it, which was in the Natya Shastra, that Satyam Bruat Priyam Bruat Na Bruat Satyam Apriyam. That you will speak the truth, but you will speak it with love. If you cannot speak it with love, then don't speak it, right? One of the rules in our traditional way was the value of good manners, right? And speaking politely. Because if you are saying something idly, at least in the Indian way, the purpose should not be to humiliate the other guy. The purpose should be to discuss and debate and hopefully learn something.
Is that why your creative liberty hasn't led to debates and controversies? People have taken in with a lot of love.
Creative liberty is again this term which has emerged in the West, which has this this thing of I am this lone ranger, rebel, taking on the evil, bad establishment. You'll notice even Western atheism has that approach. Indians had atheism as well, by the way. Many of our schools of philosophy were actually atheists. The Charvaks, Mimamsas, Sankhyas, they were all atheist schools. Bodha, Jaina, many of their schools are also atheists. And there was no oppression against them. No one tried to kill them. Nothing was wrong with it in the Indian way. You can be an atheist, you can be a believer, no problem. But you'll notice that the traditional Indian atheists didn't feel the need to insult religious people to prove themselves superior. You notice Western atheists keep doing that,
yes.
right? It's almost like the purpose isn't to explore your own path. The purpose is to show someone else down. My truth is the truth. Anyone else is worshipping false gods.
No concept of blasphemy.
They will burn in hell for eternity. These are very childish concepts, frankly, right? We didn't have that in India. Now, what bears out, what ends up happening in the real world is game theory. I mean, you know John Nash's game theory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Beautiful Mind?
No,
I've not.
I'm clearly not a movie buff at all.
No, John Nash received the Nobel Prize for it. I had actually read the original paper. I'm a BSc mathematics. Game theory speaks of how decision making and choices happen in the real world. Economists keep assuming that that human beings are rational animals. We all know that's not really. There is one aspect to that, but there is an irrational emotional angle to it as well. And John Nash goes into how game theory works, how people's decisions and choices are not just driven by what they think. They also react to how others, behave. Now, one sees this across many countries in the world. If there's one group which will take offense and enforce their writ, and the other groups are relatively polite, game theory says this is not a stable scenario. Either everyone will start taking offense, or everyone will not take offense. It has to be the only stable scenario is one of these two.
But
right?
you know, in
and you're
correct,
seeing
go
that
ahead,
work
yeah.
out, frankly, in real life.
You know, so in your recent interview, you did say that if you want to write on mythology, there's no better place than India and no better area than Dharma. But in the face of the sensitivity that we see in the country today, do you find it difficult to wade through? Is there a middle ground that you hold or a basic playbook that you use to say, this is how I'm going to portray my characters? This probably won't irk their sentiments and yet would be a success with them.
I write my books the way it comes to me. I have been in this for 12 years, 10 books. God's grace, the books have sold some 6 million copies. Have you found any controversy around? You can Google.
I'll ask you that. Is there controversy? Because, for example,
Have you heard anything?
No, for
around
example,
let me
in
tell
the
you. Let
Shiva
me tell you my
trilogy.
theory.
Not.
Let me tell you my theory for why it does not happen. Two things. One, sadly, I'm not saying it's in a majority of the cases, but it does happen. We all know it happens. Artists themselves create controversy with the help of their friends in the media. You know that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult you guys.
Are you saying
but
it's
you
a
know what
deliberate
happens.
attempt to market?
It's a very easy way to market, right? Because it's cost effective. You get publicity and you will sell. I'm very clear. I will never do controversy. And that's one of my first rules to my publisher. I just got a new publisher. And that was because I genuinely worship the gods and goddesses I write on. So I'd much rather not sell than sell through controversy.
No, so if you
now,
talk
not
about-
selling to, if I'll just complete, not selling through controversy takes harder work.
Yeah.
Right? I'm willing to do that hard work, and my publishers have to be willing to do that work, but we will not sell through controversy. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, I think many Indians are comfortable with multiple truths as long as you present your version of the truth in a respectful manner. And intentions can be seen. It doesn't have to be spoken out in an advertising board, it can be seen. Put my books aside, let me give you an example from a movie. If someone approached an Indian film producer or director and said, make a scene where the main hero breaks the base of a shivling and then picks it up and then carries it on his shoulder, then goes to a waterfall and then places it under that waterfall, any producer and director will tell you, are you crazy, right? But in the hands of someone like Raja Mauliji, who's genuinely devout, he's genuinely proud of his culture, he's genuinely devout, he genuinely worships the gods he makes movies on. It is one of the most iconic scenes of Bahubali.
Yeah.
Why? Because the viewers could see the devotion in that scene, in the faces of the actors, in the way the scene was composed, in the way the music was. Indians can see those intentions. So something which will appear to someone who's not in tune with the real India is very shocking. The real Indians will not bat an eyelid.
That's easier
That
said
is
than done, right?
No,
I'll
the
tell you
proof is in
why.
the
I'll tell you
pudding.
why.
Bahubali
People
is
on
one of the
social
biggest.
media today.
Bahubali is one of the
Sure,
biggest
I
hits
agree.
ever.
I agree.
I don't mean to blow my own trumpet, but from what my publishers told me, Shiva trilogy is the fastest selling ever. Ramchandra
Where is
series
let me
that
highlight
come
is
to
that.
a movie?
Ramchandra series is the second fastest selling ever. Have you ever seen any controversy?
No, I agree. But
There
my
you go.
point is that quite simply in an age of social media, is it as simple as, all Indians understand the logic behind it, understand the emotion behind it, and so accept it? When you talk about interpretation alone, for example, in the Shiva trilogy, the version that you put out of Lord Shiva as someone who is an opium smoking Lord Shiva, for example, to someone else could be an Adi Yogi, right? So where do you feel that
And
that interpretation
Sita is a warrior in your books as
Yeah.
opposed to how
So
we
how is
remember
it
her as a
that
very
that's-
submissive docile, which I think was absolutely fantastic.
There's a version of the Ramayana called the
Yes.
Adbhut Ramayana, which is credited to Valmiki ji. There are 3 Ramayans credited to Valmiki ji. One is the Valmiki Ramayana, the second is the Adbhut Ramayana, the third is the Ananda Ramayana. many of the interpretations that you see I've actually drawn from there. The version that I show of Lord Dashrath and Ravan having a battle close to the sea is actually from the Anand Ramayana. So Sita Ma is a warrior, for example. In the Adbhut Ramayana, there are 2 Ravans. And there's an elder Ravan, if I can complete.
Yes.
There's an elder Ravan who is killed by Sita Ma, right? And this is in the Valmiki Ramayana. I don't mean to sound rude, but I actually have far more faith in the Indian masses than in the Indian elite. Indian elites tend to get very adversarial because sadly they have been westernized to a very large degree.
Do you agree with that? That, anyone can do anything, even let's say in Adipurush, though I don't want to give any examples here, that they can interpret the Ramayana however they want because there are many versions out there and get away with
But
it because
that's
we're
the thing.
tolerant
What is the
as a
word?
society.
Freedom of expression by its very definition means someone can say something and then someone can react to it. As long as words are being answered by words, what's the problem?
Amish,
Right?
So can I-
It's only when words are answered by violence that there is a problem, right? Words are being answered by words.
So you feel a boycott call, for example,
Yeah, I was
is
just
fair
getting to
game.
that. This whole boycott culture, cutting out, cancel culture, not watching a film even before it's released, going based on a trailer like Adipurush again, if I could refer to that, and then accusing.
I know these are things that the elite circles keep discussing a great deal because, but trust me, man, Twitter is not India. Right?
No, I agree. But I'll tell you honestly, I was at the
and
Ramlila Maidan and there was
films
talk about
work-
this trailer.
Honestly, films work or don't work for various reasons, right? To think that boycott calls or something can make a film or a book
Or
flop
break a
or
film.
success, I don't buy that. Man.
You know,
Not in a population of 1.4
You don't think that-
4 billion people. No, I don't buy that. Price.
I think the logic Mr. Kamal Hassan and Vetrimaran were putting out was that at that time, right, during the Chola era, there was no concept of Hinduism. They were, yes, Shaivites, they were Vaishnavites at that time, but when Rajaraja Cholan was there was no Hinduism. So Hinduism didn't exist as a word. But do you think that it goes beyond a word? It's a principle? So to you, if I were to ask you, is Rajaraja Cholan, was he a Hindu? What would be your answer?
Let me answer this through an example that perhaps elite people can understand. Christianity, the term Jesus Christ, where does the term Christ come from? You think, what language did Jesus Christ speak?
It was Hebrew actually, and
yeah.
it was.
Hebrew or Aramaic?
And I know your answer,
Hebrew
but
or Aramaic? Where does the term Christ come from?
it's actually from. You want me to answer?
go ahead.
From the crisscross. It is. It was. It's actually Joshua. It was not even Jesus.
There you go. Applause for you. You know your stuff. Now,
so it was-
those are actually Hellenization of what were originally Hebrew or Aramaic words, right?
Yeah.
Greek, essentially, Hellenization. Now, those words then led to the term Christianity. That very term Jesus Christ became popular only when the Greeks became largely Greek. I'm sure you're aware they were pagans before that. They used to worship Murti, sun,
yeah,
just like we did.
yeah.
And the entire ancient world was essentially pagan. Many of them were wiped out, most of them violently. So that is when the term Jesus Christ or Christianity started coming a few centuries later. So can you use that to say that Saint Peter or Saint Paul weren't Christian? You know, the point I'm trying to make is the term Hindu came from Persian, right? So that itself can be fact checked. It's a much older term. But just as in the case of Christos or Jesus Christ, just because the term itself didn't exist doesn't mean that the body of philosophies that it encompassed did not exist. Of course, the term existed. And the best thing to do is actually read the text of the Cholas themselves.
They refer to themselves as Shaivites and Vaishnavites, right? Even if you
Really?
look at Kundavai,
Really?
the Nataraja statue,
Really?
etc. Do they use the word Hindu?
But did Saint Paul use the term Christian?
No, but
That does that mean
Keeping
he's not
aside
Christian? By the way,
comparisons.
the Cholas, you didn't answer my question. The Cholas believed that they were Suryavanshis. They wrote that they were from the same dynasty as Lord Ram.
So, Amish, while you've written this book, you've also written Suhail Dev. You've written on the Ram, Sita, and now, of course, the Shiva trilogy. Do you think India does not need superheroes, that we have enough heroes of our own? And I take the example of King Lalitaditya of the Kashmir region, one of the most powerful.
The
but,
Mufti-Pada.
but masses actually may
Karkota,
not know
sorry.
much about it, apart from written in Raj Tarangini. Do you think we need to go back to that, or it's happening now, that whether it's films, whether it's Bahubali or any other films that are now Adipurush also to an extent, compared to 1940s and 50s that we had lost it somehow? Do you think our Indian heroes are actually as big and we need to start acknowledging them? And is that happening? Is that your attempt from your books?
In your view, have we overdosed on the Mughal Empire? Have we written enough and more and seen enough and more through movies, but less said about our Indian kings?
And would you be writing about King Lalitaditya?
And
I do have a story
will
idea.
Shiva trilogy be a film?
We're putting it all together.
I know.
Yeah. So you
I am tired. I've done some 15 interviews. For God's sake, ask me questions one by one.
Okay, so do you
So
think
now first your
our own heroes enough
question.
in our history?
Yes, I have a story idea in mind for King Lalitaditya. Lord Shiva wills it. Hopefully, I'll write that as well. On our own heroes, I think the problem is bigger. Our education system is completely colonial. Our history is completely colonial and frankly Delhi obsessed. I'm not saying Delhi is not important, but other parts of India are important too. They need to be given airtime too. The Mughals have to be covered in Indian history. They were an important empire. Why are Lodhis given so much airtime? They were glorified zamindars. You know, Rajain Chola's empire was as big as Akbar's. Why is he not covered? Why is he reduced to just 2 lines?
Vijayanagar.
Why are Vijayanagar is meanwhile in the south? Why are the Palas not covered? Why are the Marathas not covered? The British didn't conquer India from the Mughals, they conquered India from the Marathas. Why are the Marathas not covered? Why are the Gurjar Pratiharas not covered? Why is Raja Bhoj not covered? There is an obsessive Delhi focus in our history, which is not just about which people we cover, which it also gives us an erroneous understanding of our land.
Is that
because
changing
we
though?
see, if I'll just complete my point, because we see our land as essentially a land that kept suffering invasions from the northwest. Delhi and those regions kept suffering invasions. Others were actually, if we see ourselves as an agrarian country because we are so Delhi obsessed in our history, we see ourselves as a land focused on the Khyber Pass, when actually India was actually among the greatest seafarers of the ancient world. We would know that if we actually covered other regions as well. We had universities that were founded by women. We would know that if we weren't so Delhi obsessed. So it's actually a bigger thing, and it's not just about history, it's in everything. What were you guys taught in school of the number of seasons?
Number of seasons?
Yeah.
As in weather
4.
seasons 4,
Yeah.
right?
4? Yeah, you're wrong, right? Because even I taught 4. What? Summer, autumn, winter, spring. And I had raised my hand, second standard. I was always a rebel. Ma'am, monsoon kahan gaya?
I was just going to ask that.
And she said, no, autumn is monsoon. Arey, but you said leaves fall in autumn. I've seen monsoon, leaves grow in autumn. She said, shut up, I'll take you to the principal. Boss, it's Europe which has 4 seasons. India has 6 seasons. Something as basic as this, our entire education system is padha likha ke kisi tarah bachche ko Angrez bana do. Right? There's a real world impact of such a ridiculous education system. We get shocked when our cities flood regularly. Because our cities, all the inspiration is Western cities. Our cities were designed differently because our ancestors realized our entire way of life has to be built around the monsoon. Our ancestors were clear we have to be obsessed by the rain, and they kept reinforcing it everywhere. Think about it, you guys all receive a salary. Imagine if you received your salary such that for 10 months you received 0 and you got your entire salary in 2 months. What should you do? Should you just blow up all that money in 2 months and starve for the other 10 months? Or should you be smart and save that and then spread it out over the 10 months? That's how our ancestors designed our cities. That's how they designed their way of life. Save the water during the flood, spread it out over the next 10 months.
And with that hope that War of Lanka will get us closer to our culture, our
Absolutely,
history.
here.
And
you have it.
Please focus here.
Proud on your
that we'll be proud of our culture and our history and we'll read it.
Let's
That's the
learn
focus.
from Western cultures. I'm not denying that,
Yes.
but let's be Indian first.
All the very best,
Thank
Amish
you.
Tripathi.
All the
Thank
very
you so
best
much.
Pleasure
for your
having
future
you
endeavors.
here.
Looking
Pleasure
forward
having
to
you here.
Shiva
I can-
trilogy being a movie. I'm really
Awesome.
keen on watching that.
Thank you.
And I think I
Thank
can
you.
speak for all of us when I say we learnt a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.